John.
And hi, I'm Cindy, and welcome to Pearls of Liberty. Today is May 5th, 2012, and these are definitely very interesting times to be living in. One thing that we became aware of this morning was that a local group that has been very active in resisting Agenda 21, actually more than one group that have been working together, partnering to oppose that. One of the groups that's involved has actually taken a stand that they are in favor of legislation that calls for greater integrity in regional government, when what we actually the groups were trying to do is say that regional government is not constitutional and is not, there's no direct representation of the people. But I guess that we lost some along the way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some people just either get bought off or buy into the you've got to do this to be important kind of thing. I think that's what it is. I think, you know, they see that this is where the battle is and they say, well, I've got to get in that arena, not realizing that what we need to do is hold to the law. And unlawful organizations, non-governmental organizations that have power over people, taxation, etc., need to be shut down, not cleaned up. So this is kind of a big question, and we'll get into a little bit more of that detail in a minute, but there's always that, like, where do you fight your battle? Where are the lines supposed to be drawn kind of thing? And we want to give each other the liberty, if we really believe in it, to fight where we're called to fight. And nevertheless, sometimes we also need to stand for truth, and we believe truth is truth, and not relative, but everybody sees it slightly differently. So sometimes alignments shift.
Yeah, and sometimes compromises are made that probably should not be made. Another thing that we wanted to mention this week is that you probably heard about the Secret Service in Colombia and what was there were all different stories coming out. Benjamin Fulford stated in his blog this week that a part of what was going on there was an assassination attempt against Obama through the members of the Secret Service. So this is all very nebulous, but we did want to just kind of throw it out there.
Right, yeah, amazing shifts and backside power struggles are definitely going on, and I tend to believe that Fulford's onto something there, because I haven't looked into that scandal at all myself, because this whole idea of sex scandals is like not anything that interests me, but I have this sense that that's a cover story, and that's what Fulford is saying. So tend to believe that, like I said, that he's onto something.
Very interesting. One thing that we kind of wanted to touch on that's really related to everything that we talk about, and we've mentioned this before, but just some things came out this week, and we just kind of want to reiterate this. In our world, in our political system, in our economic system, there are layers of deception. A lot of times in the truth movement, we peel back one layer and we feel like, okay, man, this is so big, we understand 9/11 was an inside job. Okay, now I get it. And then we shut down. But this web has been intricately woven, this web of deceit, to hold us in a trap and to keep us from evolving as people, so that even if we do peel back one layer, there's another layer there.
And we're talking over centuries, and we're talking purposeful deception, and then stuff just gets built on it, people assuming that they've found bedrock and start to build again, but they don't understand then why they seem to be building on shifting sand. And specifically, this is tied to what we talked about last week, the things that came forward through the California Republic via interim Governor Ken Cousins, who's a brilliant researcher. And he's now done research and connected with some people that have found that, well, the easy way of looking at it is a general post office and rural routes are the foundational logistics that make a government a government. In other words, that tie people together. You're tied to one another by communication, and that is the what has to be foundational. And that's relatively non-controversial. The slightly more, maybe much more controversial aspect of what Ken discovered is that the Constitution of the United States that we think is this bedrock may actually be shifting sand tied to the City of London, and the Declaration of Independence that was followed by the Articles of Confederation that people think were replaced by the Constitution are actually the foundation. In the document itself, it describes the union between the 13 independent states as a perpetual union. And then you had other things going on there with legislation that was for the Northwest Ordinance, the Northwest Territories, that brought those back into the Crown, tied to the Treaty of Paris, of which the King George was the treasurer of this new constitutional government. It's all really a web, as Cindy described it. And this is where we have to say you have to be open to learning new truth. You can't just say, well, anybody that comes against this, then I'm going to oppose them. If you're, not for the Constitution, then you must not be for liberty. And we don't look at it that way, at least not anymore. The foundational principle has to be individual liberty, because that's our unalienable rights. That's what we receive from God. So we fight for that. We look for the foundation on which to build, and we keep ourselves open to considering that maybe we don't have all the truth, and maybe there are layers that we need to investigate.
Just because you encounter opposition doesn't mean that you found the ultimate truth.
Yeah. And that's the thing that humans tend to do, is when they encounter opposition, they say, okay, this is our proof that we're fighting for the right thing and for the right ground, and we're not going to give this ground. Well, like I said, you have to stay open to truth, and not polarize against that comes from the opposition, because there might be truth that you need to know in order to really be fighting for your God-given unalienable rights. So the idea I want to tie to that is we need to build bridges with those that are in different arenas but have the heart of fighting for the right thing. So this is why I think it's great for liberty-minded patriots that have gone way down the rabbit hole, like we think we have to some degree, and have found all kinds of things that we never would have dreamed. And that doesn't mean that we're not allied with people that are fighting in other arenas. I'm thinking in particular of the Ron Paul campaign. And because Ron Paul is running for the president of the de facto government, which is distinctly built on shifting sand of a corporation, etc., we know that. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be promoting that and allied with that, because number one, that builds bridges, and number two, that creates a trail for people to find out truth. When I post things that have to do with some of this newer information about the Articles of Confederation, then Ron Paul people that are connected with me in one way or another get that and are exposed to that. Maybe they follow that trail, maybe they don't, but there's a path. So the thing that has weakened the liberty movement throughout history is this isolation and this tunnel vision and this identification with our own camp. We have to be broadly connected, and we have to be fighting for liberty in many different arenas. I don't think that necessarily means we need to be in non-governmental organizations. There is some line that we need to draw to say, wait a minute, that's just not turf worth fighting for. But the principle is there is a broad arena in which to fight for liberty, and let's not get isolated and compartmentalized, because that's when the enemy can easily cordon us off and make us ineffective.
Sure, and people can stop seeking truth at any particular layer that they've found, but why would you stop? You've already begun a pursuit of truth. Why would you not just continue to pursue truth until you can't find another layer of deception, and nobody's able to show you another layer of deception? But you did mention Ron Paul, and didn't you see a map? How is he doing leading up to the...
Yeah, I think maybe we'll put a link to that with this blog, and or Cindy will put it up on the screen or something. But if you listen to the mainstream media, you actually hear, and this was a commentator on Fox News said this, now that there's no one else running against Romney. Bah, blatantly false. Blatantly false. Ron Paul has not conceded by any means. He's just totally ignored by the mainstream media. As the delegate count is kind of nebulous. It's hard to really know exactly the criteria to measure it by. And some states have more delegates at stake than others. Some are more bound than others, and it's not real easy to get a clear delegate count. But what we saw is a map that has been put together, I think reliably, by showing which states are Romney states and which states are Paul states, and it's not a runaway for Romney by any means, and it's almost certain to go into a broker convention. We've mentioned that before, and yet the media would have you believe that it's all sewed up, it's all over. That is complete hogwash. It's just disinformation. So don't be discouraged. That's part of the reason that Ron Paul is running. A big part, I think, is to show up the fraudulent nature of the system. You can go online, connect to Facebook people, whatever. I see lots of photos of Ron Paul rallies. They're huge, as many as 10,000 at a recent one. And it's happening all across America. The rallies for Romney are tiny, minuscule by comparison. And it's becoming more and more obvious that the system of the two-party system is not representing the people, and it's actually blatantly fraudulent and in cahoots with the mainstream media, who is presenting a false picture about what's going on.
Well, go Ron Paul. Don heard some sad news yesterday, and this might not seem extremely significant to a lot of people, but it actually does to us, because we know a little bit about the context of this event. About 1 in 10 million buffalo are born white, not albino, but white. And this has long been considered a very sacred event for Native Americans when a white buffalo is born. One was born last year and has been slaughtered and skinned.
Brutally murdered and skinned. This, I don't know if you'd still call it a baby, a yearling buffalo. And it's just atrocious. It's extremely sad. That was a momentous event held as sacred by many Native Americans, and I believe it was in the Lakota area, the Lakota tribe. And of course, they know that this is forces of evil attempting to steal the blessing and the destiny. The person, I forget his name, that spoke to the media about this said that now that people know that this has happened, this is just going to increase the awareness of what's going on. So yes, the evil is being exposed, and we don't believe that it's stoppable, that we believe that evil will be stopped. We believe that the rise of awareness and awakening that's happening it can't be stopped, and it just seeing horrible things like this done is just going to increase the desire to break through the evil that has attempted to keep people enslaved.
Sure, and to the Native Americans, this is a very sacred event. It's been prophesied for a long time, not the death, but the birth. And it's as if, some Old Testament prophecy were fulfilled. I don't want to go as far as to say, like, when, Jesus was born, that the sign was that a virgin would give birth. It's not to that quite, we don't see it as being to that degree. But in the hearts of the Native Americans, it has that sort of significance. And for the creature to have been slain as it was, I'm sure it's devastating to Native Americans, and we do ask the Lord to let the good that is a part of that prophecy of when that animal would be born to come forth, that the Native Americans would receive blessing. And actually I think that that's the prophecy, that through the Native Americans we all would be blessed. And I'm not sure that there are things that we're supposed to learn from them.
We say, yes, Lord, bring it on. The battle has been engaged, and may it not be bloody, may it be in our hearts and minds, and because that's where the real battleground is, that's where the victory lies, is in truth getting out, going forward, and there really isn't any stopping it.
Amen. And this is kind of a complex idea, but Don is confident enough about it that he wants to venture out into it. And I don't know how much depth you want to get into, but I know you wanted to talk a little bit about what happened in 1213 with King John, and then what later happened in 1215 with King John.
Right. As I was kind of thinking through some of these things, that where we have a false foundation, and then something breaks us loose from that, then I began to see the beginnings of a historical pattern. And I'm not sure how well I can articulate this, but for instance, we've talked about this before, 1213.org, Prince John was convinced by the Pope that he had sinned terribly, and that the only thing that he could do to win back his salvation was to give the Pope the entire realm of his kingdom, all of the land for forever and ever. So he did that. So that's actually why the Vatican thinks they have a claim on everything. 2 years later, the nobles and allied with the common men said, we're not having any part of this, and came up with the Magna Carta, which they forced the king to sign. And that is, the Magna Carta is the basis for the common law which underlies Western civilization until that's been overlaid with other stuff to keep us off the land and away from that true foundation of liberty. But you first had this horrible enslavement develop, and then you had, wait a minute, this will not stand, we're going to break free from that. It's basically the same thing that happened with the Israelites in Egypt. And under Pharaoh, they were horribly oppressed, and then they broke free. So there's something that's hardwired into human beings that says, I was born to live free, and you can push me down so far, but you get far enough and I rise up with great power. And yeah, even in the movie Robin Hood with
Russell Crowe.
With Russell Crowe, there's that insignia on the sword that about lambs rising and then rising again until they become lions. So this is the principle that I'm seeing, and oftentimes there'll be a false solution where the enemy tries to bring people back in, tries to say, no, yeah, here's your freedom here. And I'm starting to see the Constitution that way because of the tie to the City of London, and especially in the banking thing. You have to understand enough American history to know that Alexander Hamilton was an agent for the Rothschilds. So the pairing that I see, that let me go through like one other one. There was the time of the Spanish Inquisition and the great persecution that happened through the Roman Catholic Church in the late 1400s, and that was particularly severe. Then what happens in the mid to early to mid 1500s was Martin Luther and the Reformation and the Word of God and the printing press getting into the hands of the people. So there was that great breakthrough there. Then you had this false thing with the Jesuits come in and try to put a lid on the Reformation. So, and then all these things carry out through history, of course, but there are key times when you have these, the lid trying to be put on, the breakthrough happening, and then the other false solution happening. And so that's also how I see what happened with the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and then the Constitution and the banking system tying the free people back into the slave paradigm. Now we're seeing it. Now we're seeing what happened. And so here is the other opportunity to break through. Right as the New World Order is coming down, we see an incredible awakening and awareness of liberty. They go hand in hand because the desire for a breakthrough comes when the oppression increases. So that's actually an encouragement. Some people might say, well, how can both Benjamin Fulford and Alex Jones be right? Alex focuses so much on the dark side and all this enslavement stuff, and Ben is focusing on all this breakthrough and this new banking stuff and this the hope for humanity that's right on the horizon, and the cabal their days being numbered. Well, they both are right because they're two sides of the same coin. It's always darkest before the dawn kind of thing. And we should be hopeful because this is when humanity is wired to rise up when things get bad. I don't have a timetable, but I just know that we are in momentous times, and we are on the threshold of a breakthrough, but also facing very serious opposition, and the enemy will try to bring great discouragement and make us believe that resistance is futile, you will be assimilated type of thinking. So that's what I wanted to say. It's kind of long-winded, but hopefully you see that this is a pattern throughout history, and we really are on the edge of something big.
Well, and as Don mentioned, the film Robin Hood, we did want to highlight a couple films. One is Robin Hood, because if you don't know a whole lot or understand a lot about that period of time around the Magna Carta, Robin Hood is considered to be a legend, so it's not absolute historical fact, but the story is very enlightening regarding what that period of history was like and why there was insistence upon the Magna Carta. It wasn't sprung out of the goodness of King John's heart. Now, I mean, we don't know how good or bad of a man he was. Obviously, Pope Innocent was deceiving him when he told him that he had committed the unpardonable sin, which he could reverse by signing over all of his worldly goods and essentially all the goods of the whole world to the Vatican. And so it's just a great film. It's entertaining. I have to think that it didn't receive warmer reception from critics because it is so politically, it's so damning to the world system the way it is now.
Ridley Scott's done, who's the director or producer, I forget which, of that film, has done some other great stuff, and we were really impressed with that film because of the portrayal. And Russell Crowe's just great in films like that. And another movie you wanted to talk about was The Gladiator, and of course he's in that. And this is another battle between empire or this
Republic,
centralized control system, and free humanity. And really that is the struggle of the ages. And a quote from Thomas Jefferson is that he said, the choice now, I'm paraphrasing, the choice now is the same as what has been throughout all of history, whether mankind will be free and govern themselves or whether we will be ruled by a tiny elite. And that is, again, the choice that's laid before us. We are very much in the same kind of position that Jefferson and the Founding Fathers were in, and we are deceived if we think that America is free and we are still this beacon of light. We have 1/5 of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners, and guess what? We have most of the laws. That's why it's so easy to imprison people, because when laws abound, then it's easy to ensnare people in that tyranny, and that's what America has become, a police state, a prison state. So it's time to wake up from your slumber.
One other film that we wanted to mention is not a feature film. It's actually found on YouTube, and it's rather long. There are 2 parts, and I think each part is 2 hours. But it's a talk by William Schnoebelen about his years on the dark side, living as a vampire and being completely immersed in the Masons, the Illuminati, all sorts of darkness that we don't need to get into. But now he's on the other side of all that. He sees the depth of deception, and because of what he's gone through, he has tremendous understanding. So it's a very helpful film in understanding some of these things we're talking about.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen all of that, but Cindy has, and when you say that he was a vampire, people are going to think, well, that can't be. Those are mythical kind of things. And whether or not you take that at the emotional level or the physical level or the spiritual level, there's something to that word as it applies to his story. So I'd encourage you not to write it off because of that comment. He's a good speaker and presents his ideas very well, and he's speaking to those that call themselves Christians, and he does communicate in a pretty well in a non-religious way too. So we found it interesting.
Go in peace.